Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano. This video is going to be on why keto isn't an unnatural state, and it's not just a crash diet or a fad diet. It is something that people would be using for years and years and years, and it's probably something that occupied most of our evolution. So, as long of an intro as that is, I'm going to tell you in this video why it's natural and why it's not something you should be afraid of. So, is ketosis a natural state? My answer is yes, particularly fat adaptation is a natural state. A, because of the reason that it's so useful and humans would have prioritized certain things in our evolution that were useful to survival, and because humans are able to tap into fat adaptation so effectively when you do a keto diet for a long enough time, that's one evolutionary adaptation to being fat adapted. Also, that's just the reasoning, but in terms of the actual proof, there's lots of evidence that suggests that babies are primarily ketogenic. Even when their blood sugars are spiked if they consume a high-carb meal, they do tend to go back into ketosis quicker than adults. Also, most mother's breast milk, depending on the woman who is feeding, tends to be higher in fats and proteins, which again are animal fats and proteins. Humans would have a good distribution in evolution of vegetables and fruits, but you got to consider the context too, because those things wouldn't necessarily be available year-round. And agriculture and a lot of processed grains weren't really around until the agricultural revolution, so humans would rarely be having dense grain products up until several hundred years ago, once farming was much more popular. Most of the foods humans would have been consuming in evolution would have been animal fats, animal proteins, a good mix of vegetables and fruits, depending on the time, the location of the year, how strong they had winters, and even some cultures that were in, I think, Africa, some African cultures that have higher amounts of fruit and vegetable creation throughout the year, studies have shown that they are much more metabolically flexible in terms of their fat adaptation and how quickly their body is able to get back into ketosis in a fat adapted state. If you think about what the fat adapted state is, it's a position where your body's able to use fats very effectively and carbs very effectively, which would be very advantageous in evolution, and it would allow your body to basically use the scarce amounts of carbs that were available to it very effectively. Of course, that's important to survival, and humans would not be eating the amount of carbohydrates and processed carbs that we have nowadays. So our metabolisms were far more likely to be fat adapted just due to the resources that people would have. Additionally, if there's one food that we can say humans are meant to consume, it's breast milk, and the breast milk example is great as well. But of course, depending on a woman's diet, that can influence what her breast milk quantity is made up of. But additionally, even technically a keto vegan diet would be very conducive to fat adaptation. So even if you're eating 80% of your calories from broccoli and greens all day, they're so low glycemic and so fibrous that any culture that would eat high amounts of plant foods would still be ketogenic. And some studies have shown that even high amounts of plant foods, despite, pushing your overall carb intake over 50 grams per day, would still be ketogenic and still be far more conducive to a fat adapted metabolism than mixing it with these processed carbs we have nowadays. Fiber is the one key to absorbing carbohydrates in a way that doesn't mess with your body's blood glucose and blood insulin. And in one book I read, which is called The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, he said that nature packaged the cure with the poison. So the poison being processed carbohydrates, very, shocking amounts of carbs to your system, right? Not all carbs necessarily, but high densely processed carbs are more dangerous to your body because they don't have that fiber. And that fiber is the cure that kind of balances how your body's going to use carbs and doesn't mess with your metabolism. So if you're having very fibrous carbs on a keto diet, that's not necessarily going to mess with your levels of fat adaptation. So even in that sense, a plant-based keto diet is much more, doable. And also, any culture that was eating high amounts of plant foods or fruits would be much more conducive to a fat adapted metabolism. When it comes to your body and how you should view fat. Fat is literally stored energy, and it makes a lot of sense as why we're gaining. You see so many obese people nowadays because carbs are energy sources that were a little more scarce back in tribal evolutionary times, and your body would be much more likely to store it as fat due to its insulin response as well, especially for the grainy carbs, just because of how they get metabolized in your body. And your body is much more likely to store them as fat, which, when you consider that our body is a survival machine, makes a lot of sense. It basically is like your body consuming the fastest absorbable source of energy, and your body wants to store it just in case you don't have food or you're malnourished for a period of time. That is the sole purpose of fat on your body. It's stored energy. And the reason why keto is such an effective fat loss approach is because it allows your body to tap into and enhance its ability to burn fat. So even though many short-term studies have shown that calorie diets and keto diets yield the same results, all of that is dependent on fat loss is your calories. I think there's going to be a lot more studied on fat adapted individuals, because fat adaptation is basically your body's ability to burn fat, and somebody who's able to burn fat at a faster rate would see better fat burning effects despite calorie differences or similarities. Some studies have shown that, and of all the studies on fat adapted individuals, most of them have shown that fat adapted people have higher rates of fat burning. So in general, you should get fat adapted. Do a ketogenic diet for a long enough time. That's going to get you fat adapted. It's going to allow your body to use carbs and fats both more effectively. And it's my favorite way to bodybuild and do cutting diets and fat loss diets. But additionally, it's a slower burning energy source. And if your concern is ketosis a natural state, fat is a slower energy source. And it makes sense, because if humans were going, periods of time without food, which we would be, because, we don't have pharmacies and fruit vendors and local butchers and other grocery stores in evolution, humans would go without food for longer periods of time than we do nowadays. And storing fat would be more conducive to that, which would be controlled by your carb intake basically, and your calorie intake. And additionally, as fat is a slower burning energy source, it makes more sense, because if you're going around scavenging all day, your body would be better off in terms of your survival. You'd be more likely to survive if you had a slow burning energy source. Think about it. If you had a carbohydrate based diet in tribal times, you would not necessarily be able to, your energy sources would be all used up by the time you're, scavenging a whole day looking for food or animals to hunt. And it makes more sense that your body would be using fat at that time, just because of how it is used metabolically. So that's my 2 cents on why keto is a natural state. You don't have to be afraid of it. Fat adaptation is optimal. Most of the studies are done on non-fat adapted individuals, unfortunately. However, there are more people who are, making those studies happen, and I want to put this out here because I want to spread the fat adaptation approach to people. If you do keto for a long enough time, after a month or so, you will get fat adapted, but your body will get better and better and better as you go on. It's great for bodybuilding, it's great for fitness, and it's good for your overall health. That's how we're made to be. That's how humans were made to survive. It's very good for survival, and anything that was good for survival is what would keep our species on the planet. So that's my 2 cents on keto as a natural state. It's not starvation mode, it's preservation mode, and allows your body to tap into its resources more effectively than a carbohydrate-based diet, at least in terms of allowing you to do it while keeping your sanity. So despite low calories. Anyways, my name is Anthony Romano. Thank you for watching this video. Peace.